The cold, rusted ruins of Arcadia stretched out beneath a pale, sickly sky, the remains of what had once been a flourishing human metropolis. Now, it was just another graveyard in a universe that had long since forgotten humanity. Zane Calloway surveyed the desolate cityscape, his breath misting in the chilled air, a strange feeling tightening in his chest. Every step was heavy with the weight of a past that refused to let go. The rest of his team moved silently behind him, their blackened armor blending into the shadows of the crumbling structures. "Keep it tight, team," Zane whispered, his voice a low rasp in the eerie silence. They were here for one thing: information. A single lead that might shift the course of the war. An alien transmission had pointed to a hidden stronghold, where the Zalanar Empire had been hoarding supplies and, more importantly, weapons. The Resistance couldn't afford to miss this chance. Every minute counted. The team moved like ghosts, their footsteps barely making a sound as they approached the target building, a once proud tower now gutted by the ravages of time and war. The entrance lay just ahead, guarded by alien drones patrolling in rhythmic cycles, their red eyes scanning the darkened streets. Zane's hand hovered over the weapon at his side. The quiet was deafening, each beat of his pulse amplifying the tension in the air. He gave a subtle hand signal. His team split into two groups, silently advancing, each member a shadow in their own right. They were in position. Zane checked his wrist display. The signal from the Zalanar devices they'd intercepted was growing stronger. They were close. "On me," Zane muttered under his breath. They moved forward, and as they neared the entrance, a sudden noise caught Zane's attention. A figure emerged from the shadows, a lone human standing near the doorway, arms raised in surrender, silhouetted by the glow of distant explosions. The team froze. Zane's mind raced. A human in the middle of this alien stronghold? Impossible. Had the Zalanar taken one of his people captive? Or was it some kind of trap? The figure's head was bowed, making it impossible to make out any details at first. Then, it straightened, revealing a face that was eerily calm, no sign of fear, no panic. Just, nothing. "Hold," Zane commanded, motioning for his team to halt. They didn't know who this person was, but they weren't about to risk everything on a wild guess. Zane kept his distance, scanning the human with the precision of a veteran. His instincts screamed at him to approach with caution. Every piece of the puzzle told him to be wary, to question this stranger's motives. But a strange curiosity gnawed at him. The human's gaze flicked up, locking with Zane's for a brief, electrifying moment. There was something almost unnatural about it. His eyes were wide and unsettling, yet there was no fear. Just that calm, almost too calm. And then, inexplicably, a grin spread across the man's face. "Is that all you've got?" The human's voice rang out, loud and defiant. It didn't fit the situation, didn't make sense. His tone was taunting, almost mocking. Zane blinked. The man hadn't moved, hadn't even flinched. The team exchanged wary glances, weapons raised, but Zane's instincts kept him still. The stranger stepped forward, still grinning. A strange laugh bubbled from his throat, soft, almost playful, but it was far too loud for the grim situation. It echoed off the ruined buildings, a jarring sound that sent a chill down Zane's spine. "Are you mad?" Zane growled, stepping forward, eyes narrowing. He couldn't make sense of this. No human should be here, much less acting like this. "What the hell are you doing here?" The stranger cocked his head, his grin widening. "Waiting for you. Or maybe, just trying to see if you'd try to shoot me." Zane's blood ran cold. He'd given the order to hold fire, there was no way anyone should be able to survive direct shots from the team's plasma rifles. They'd never encountered anyone who could simply laugh off their attacks. And yet, this man was still standing there, his clothes, tattered as they were, undisturbed. "Who are you?" Zane demanded again, voice low, an edge of disbelief creeping in. There was something terribly wrong with this picture. "I'm a survivor," the man said, as though it was the most natural thing in the world. "Like you. Or maybe not. But I've survived." Unlike most of them, anyway. He gestured around to the desolate city, his grin never faltering. Survivor. Zane's heart skipped a beat. Could this be true? Another human, one who had managed to survive the Zalanar occupation? It was almost too much to believe. Before Zane could respond, one of his men took a step forward. Captain, he's laughing like... Shut it, Zane snapped, cutting him off. His gaze never left the strange human. Something was off, but there was also an undeniable pull. The person before him might hold answers, or they might be a ticking time bomb. The man's grin faded slightly, but not entirely. I know what you're thinking, he said, as if reading Zane's mind. You're wondering how I'm still alive after you shot me, right? Well, let's just say the Zalanar have some interesting ideas about keeping people like me alive. They think they've got the edge, but they're wrong. Zane's pulse quickened. The Zalanar? What was he talking about? Who did this to you? Zane asked, lowering his weapon slightly but keeping it trained on the man. Why are you here? The human's eyes gleamed with something akin to mania. I'm here because I'm part of something bigger than you. Bigger than all of you. You think you're the last ones left, don't you? But you've only scratched the surface. I know what you're after, Captain. And I can help you find it. Zane's mind raced. What was he saying? Was this just some deluded survivor, or was there more to this story? Who sent you? Zane demanded. What do you know about the weapon we're after? The man's eyes flickered with something dark. The weapon? Oh, it's real. It's real, all right. But it's not just a weapon. It's something more. And you won't get to it until you understand the truth. Zane's brow furrowed. This wasn't what he expected. Every instinct told him to be cautious, to turn away. But the words lingered in his mind, the possibility of something beyond their comprehension drawing him in. With a deep breath, Zane spoke again. You're coming with us. If you know something, you're coming with us. The human smiled, his laugh echoing again. Of course I am. Where else would I go? As they moved forward, Zane's thoughts remained a tangle of suspicion and uncertainty. Something was wrong, very wrong. But in the strange world they lived in, this new mystery might just be the only key to humanity's survival. And that, in itself, was both terrifying and exhilarating. The dim light from the overhead panels flickered weakly in the small, cramped room that had once been a luxury suite. Now, it was a temporary refuge, hastily turned into a makeshift headquarters by the human resistance. Zane stood at the center of the room, his arms crossed, his gaze never leaving the man sitting in front of him. Jason, or whatever name the stranger had given, sat slouched in an old chair, hands clasped together, still grinning. That grin had not wavered since Zane first laid eyes on him. It was unnerving, almost unnatural. Zane paced slowly, the creaking of his boots against the cracked floor echoing in the room. The others remained at a distance, standing by the door, whispering in hushed voices. They didn't trust him. Neither did Zane. But the man was insistent. He had information, crucial information that could alter the course of the war. Tell me what you know, Zane said flatly, stopping in front of Jason. Jason leaned back, almost casually, in the chair. You want answers? His voice had lost its previous erratic edge, replaced now with something colder, sharper. I'm sure you've been wondering how I survived that little greeting of yours. He tilted his head, eyes glinting. Well, it's simple, really. Zane's patience was thinning. How? Jason's smile widened, and for a moment, Zane wondered if the man was actually insane. The Zalanar did this to me. They've been experimenting on humans for years. Those they didn't wipe out, they kept, for their own purposes. The words hung in the air, the weight of them sinking into Zane's chest. He couldn't believe it. The Zalanar had always been ruthless, but this? They'd experimented on humans? It didn't make sense. The aliens saw them as little more than vermin. Zane leaned forward, his voice tight. What do you mean, experimented? What exactly did they do to you? Jason's eyes darkened, a flicker of something more than madness passing through them. They didn't just capture us. They altered us. Changed us. My body was rebuilt, enhanced. I'm not like the others. I can take a bullet and keep walking. I can survive what would have killed anyone else. It's all thanks to their advances in biology. Zane's mind raced, but he remained silent, trying to piece together this new reality. It didn't fit. What did they want from you? Why you? Jason's laughter came out in a sharp burst. Me? I was just one of many. They had a plan. Create a new kind of soldier, one who couldn't die. One who could take on entire armies and never fall. But something went wrong. They didn't count on how the human mind reacts to that kind of power. Zane stepped back, his fingers brushing against the old metal table. His thoughts were a whirlwind. The implications were staggering. The Zal-Nar had developed humans into weapons, turned them into something less than human, and now, it seemed, they were paying the price. You're telling me you were one of their soldiers? Zane asked, his voice quieter now, his anger and disbelief mixing. Jason's eyes were dark, the madness returning, but there was also an edge of sorrow. I didn't ask for this. But now, it's who I am. I can't go back. They made me this way. And now, he shook his head. Now I have a chance to make them pay. Zane wasn't sure if he believed Jason's story, but there was something in his words, something in his eyes, that made him wonder. The resistance had long fought for survival, scraping together what little they had left, but now Jason had given them a chance at something greater, a weapon, perhaps, or a way to fight back in a way they never had before. I'm not sure I trust you, Zane said, his gaze unwavering. But you're right about one thing. If the Zal-Nar are doing this to humans, then we need to know everything. You've got something we need. Jason nodded slowly. I know where they've been keeping the weapon. It's not a weapon in the traditional sense. It's something more. It was part of their project to make us better. Something that will turn the tide for you. For us. Zane clenched his fists, the tension thick in the air. The walls seemed to close in around him as Jason's words seeped into his mind. He had to know more, but trusting this man, this experiment, wasn't easy. And what exactly is this weapon? Zane asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Jason's grin returned, though it was more subdued now, less manic. It's not just a weapon, Captain. It's a prototype. A human who has been enhanced beyond anything you've ever seen. And you'll find her, if you're smart. She's the key. She's the one who can stop them. Zane stared at Jason, trying to process everything. A human enhanced beyond imagination? The very idea seemed impossible. But the more he thought about it, the more it made sense. The Zal-Nar had used human bodies for experiments, why not push the limits of what was possible? Where is she? Zane asked, his tone hardening. Jason leaned forward, his eyes gleaming. I can show you. I know where she's kept, in the heart of their strongest base. But it won't be easy. The Zal-Nar don't just leave their best assets lying around. Zane let the silence stretch for a long moment, weighing the risk. He had no choice. The Zal-Nar had pushed humanity to the brink, and Jason, no matter how strange or unpredictable, was offering them a chance to fight back. If what you say is true, Zane said, his voice firm, then we have no time to waste. We're going after her. And you're coming with us. Jason didn't smile this time. His expression was one of grim determination, as if he knew what lay ahead would not be easy, but it was necessary. Good. Because if you don't, you'll all be dead before you even have a chance. Zane nodded, his mind made up. The mission had changed. They weren't just infiltrating a base now, they were on the brink of something much bigger. Get your gear, Zane ordered. We move out in 20. This is it. No turning back. As Jason stood, his posture straightening for the first time since Zane had met him, the reality of what lay ahead began to set in. The weight of the decision was heavy, but there was no other option. Humanity had survived on sheer willpower so far, and this was their chance to turn the tide. Jason was their ticket. Whether they liked it or not. The night air in Arcadia was thick with smoke, the remnants of battle still hanging in the atmosphere. Zane Calloway stood at the edge of a ruined street, his eyes fixed on the imposing structure ahead, the ZAL-NAR base, a monolithic fortress of steel and glass. The city was a twisted maze of wreckage and shadow, but this place, this fortress, was the heart of the enemy's operations. If they were to succeed, if humanity was to survive, it all came down to this. Jason stood beside him, arms crossed, watching the base with a cool detachment. His expression had softened since their first meeting, but there was something else in his eyes now, something darker. Zane couldn't help but notice the subtle tremor in his hands, the faint tremble in his voice whenever he spoke about the project, the experiments. The more Zane saw, the more he realized Jason's immunity to harm came at a steep cost, not just to his body, but to his mind. Zane glanced over at him, noticing the way Jason's eyes lingered on the towering gates. "You sure you can handle this?" Zane asked, the question more loaded than it seemed. "You've been through hell to get this far." Jason's eyes flicked toward him, the familiar grin returning for a split second. "Hell's just a place I've been. But this is something different. If I'm not ready for this, I should have died a long time ago." Zane didn't respond, instead focusing on the task at hand. They had already set the plan into motion, 2 squads of resistance fighters positioned around the perimeter, ready to provide cover. Jason's knowledge of the ZAL-NAR's security systems had been invaluable, allowing them to find a weakness in the base's outer defenses. But there were still too many variables, too many unknowns, and Zane's gut told him this wasn't going to be as simple as Jason had promised. The comms crackled in his ear. "Captain, we're ready to move in. The signal's green." The voice was crisp, efficient, Alara, his most trusted lieutenant. She'd been by his side through countless missions, and if anyone could keep things under control, it was her. "Copy that, Alara," Zane replied, tightening his grip on the rifle slung over his shoulder. "Move in on my mark." They moved as one, silent, swift, and deadly. Jason led them toward the back of the base, his movements precise, almost predatory. Zane couldn't shake the feeling that the man knew this place better than he should, as if he'd been here before. But there was no time to question it now. The only thing that mattered was getting inside and finding the weapon Jason had spoken of. They reached the security checkpoint, where the alien guards stood motionless, their red eyes scanning the area. Zane signaled for his team to halt. The plan had been simple: disable the guards silently, slip past the cameras, and reach the inner sanctum. But as Zane watched Jason, he couldn't help but notice a flicker of hesitation in the man's posture. For a moment, it seemed like Jason was struggling with something deeper than the mission itself. "Jason," Zane whispered, his voice sharp. "What's going on?" Jason's lips twisted into a grimace, the first sign of vulnerability Zane had seen since they'd begun this mission. "I don't know how much longer I can hold it together. They did something to me, something that's breaking down my mind." He took a shallow breath, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm not sure I can control it anymore." Zane's eyes narrowed. The weight of the situation pressed down on him. This mission wasn't just about winning, it was about survival, and the stakes were higher than ever. "We don't have a choice. We need to finish this. For all of us." Jason nodded, but Zane could see the unease in his eyes. He wasn't sure how much longer Jason could keep his grip on reality. But there was no time to debate it. The team advanced, disabling the guards swiftly and silently, just as they had planned. The doors to the inner sanctum opened with a soft hiss, revealing a long, sterile hallway bathed in cold light. Jason led them deeper into the facility, his steps sure, but Zane couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The walls felt too quiet, the air too still. As they moved forward, Zane's instincts flared. This wasn't just a simple raid. The further they went, the more it felt like a trap. "We're too deep," Alara muttered over the comms, her voice laced with caution. "Something's not right, Captain." Zane didn't reply, his eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. They reached a large door at the end of the hall, heavy, reinforced, and guarded by a series of Zalan AR defense systems. The weapon was behind that door. Jason had promised. Zane turned to him, voice low but firm. "This is it. You sure you can open it?" Jason looked at the door, his eyes narrowing as he focused. He reached out, placing his hand on the control panel, and for a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a soft buzz, the door slid open. The room beyond was stark, clinical, and cold. In the center stood a pod, large, glass, and filled with a faint, glowing substance. Zane's heart skipped a beat as he saw the figure inside. She was human, or at least she appeared to be. But her features were altered. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and her eyes, when they opened, were a vibrant shade of blue that seemed unnatural. She wasn't just a human. She was something else. Jason stepped forward, his breath shaky. "This is her," he said, his voice trembling. "This is what the Zalan AR have been working on. She's the key." Zane approached the pod slowly, his mind racing. He could feel the weight of the decision bearing down on him. They'd come this far, but now, the reality of the situation hit him harder than anything else. He'd known they'd be facing danger, but this? A human, altered to the point of no longer being fully human. Could he trust her? Could they afford to? "Alara," Zane said, his voice tight. "Do we take her?" Before Alara could answer, the pod began to hiss, the glow inside intensifying. The woman's eyes shot open, and in an instant, her hands were gripping the glass, her body thrashing against the restraints. Jason stepped back, his face twisted in anguish. "She's not ready," he muttered. I didn't know she'd be like this." Zane's heart pounded. "Get her out, now!" With a single motion, Alara pulled a lever, and the pod's restraints released. The woman collapsed to the ground, gasping for air, her eyes wild with confusion and fear. Zane moved forward cautiously, but she backed away, her voice hoarse and panicked. "Who are you? What is this?" she demanded, her voice filled with raw emotion. Zane's mind raced, but one thing was clear, there was no turning back now. "We're here to help you," he said, his tone as steady as he could make it. "We need you. The Zalan AR, they've been using you as a weapon." She looked up at him, eyes narrowing. "A weapon? I'm not a weapon. I'm—" Her words were cut off by a sudden, overwhelming surge of power. She shot up, her body glowing with an unnatural energy. The force of it knocked Zane off his feet. She was not just the key, she was a force of nature. A weapon. And now, she was free. Zane's hand went to his side, reaching for his weapon, but something told him this wasn't going to be as simple as pointing a gun. This was something far beyond anything they had anticipated. And as the room erupted into chaos, Zane knew this was just the beginning.